In February 2026, the United States made one of the most consequential environmental decisions in modern history. A scientific finding that had shaped climate policy for more than 15 years was repealed. Known as the Endangerment Finding, it declared that greenhouse gases threaten public health and the environment. That conclusion allowed the federal government to regulate emissions across the economy. But now, that foundation is gone. So what does this mean for America? And for the world? To understand the impact, we have to go back nearly 2 decades. In 2007, the United States Supreme Court issued a landmark ruling in a case known as Massachusetts versus the Environmental Protection Agency. The court ruled that greenhouse gases could be considered pollutants under the Clean Air Act. That meant the government had the authority, and potentially the obligation, to regulate them. 2 years later, in 2009, scientists at the Environmental Protection Agency published their answer. After reviewing decades of climate research, they concluded that greenhouse gases posed a real danger to public health and welfare. Carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide. Together, these gases were contributing to a warming planet and increasing risks to human societies. That determination became known as the Endangerment Finding, and it became the legal foundation for most U.S. climate regulation. Vehicle emissions standards, power plant regulations, industrial pollution rules, all of them relied on the conclusion that greenhouse gases endangered public health. But in 2026, that determination was rescinded. The Environmental Protection Agency formally repealed the Endangerment Finding. Supporters of the decision argued that previous regulations were overly burdensome and costly for industry and consumers. They claimed removing the finding would reduce regulatory costs and lower prices for vehicles and energy. Critics, however, warned the move could significantly weaken federal climate policy. Without the Endangerment Finding, the legal basis for regulating greenhouse gas emissions under the Clean Air Act becomes far more limited. That could slow or halt many federal climate initiatives. But the story doesn't end there. Across the United States, individual states have already begun creating their own climate regulations. States like California, New York, and Washington have established aggressive emissions targets and renewable energy mandates. In fact, the repeal may accelerate this trend. If federal regulation weakens, states may step in to fill the gap. The result could be a patchwork of climate policies across the country. Different rules depending on where you live. Different standards for industries operating across state lines. And the consequences may not stop at U.S. borders. The United States remains one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases in the world. Its climate policies influence global markets, technology investment, and international climate negotiations. When U.S. regulations tighten, industries often innovate. Electric vehicles, renewable power, energy efficiency technologies. But when regulations loosen, the incentives can change. Some analysts believe the repeal could slow certain transitions toward low-carbon technologies. Others argue market forces will continue driving change regardless of federal policy. After all, renewable energy has become dramatically cheaper in the past decade. In many parts of the world, solar and wind are already the lowest cost sources of electricity, and global investment in clean energy continues to grow. Still, the repeal has sparked a new wave of legal battles. Several states and environmental organizations have filed lawsuits challenging the decision. They argue that the scientific evidence supporting the endangerment finding has only strengthened since 2009. Climate impacts, from extreme heat to flooding and wildfires, are becoming more visible every year. The courts may ultimately determine whether the federal government can reverse a scientific finding that has shaped environmental regulation for more than a decade. Whatever the outcome, the repeal raises a larger question. How should societies respond to climate risk? Through government regulation? Through market innovation? Through global cooperation? Or through some combination of all three? The answer will shape energy systems, economies, and the environment for decades to come. Because the decisions made today will determine the climate of tomorrow. And the world is watching.